without the extra credit added in, the mean was 55% this time, so it's up 5% from last time. It looked to me as I was inputting the grades that the people who needed to improve really improved some very dramatically, so I congratulate you for figuring out what you need to do, put in for this class. If you're not aware, you need to study 3 to 5 hours per week per credit hour. So this is a 4-credit course, so you should be putting in anywhere between 12 and 20 hours per week for every course. Now this course, maybe you need to do a little more, maybe you don't need to do as much, you just have to find your rhythm. But if you're not doing what you think you should be doing in the way, or if you're not achieving the grade that you want, look very honestly at the amount of work you're putting in for the course. Are you putting in 12 to 20 hours per week? If not, step that up. If you are putting that in and you're not getting the grade you want, then come and see your exam. See both exams as soon as the makeups are over tomorrow at 5. Well, come in Wednesday morning or Thursday to see your exam. Find out what kind of errors you're making. There are 3 stupid kind of errors that you can make. 1, you're not getting enough sleep before the exam. 2, you're not eating before you come to the exam. Or you're eating too close to the exam and then you're sleeping through the exam, or your brain's not able to utilize the calories. And then the 3rd kind of stupid mistake is you had the question right on your exam, but you wrote it, you bubbled it in wrong on the scan file. Those are 3 things that you can eliminate for the next exam. If you're not making those kind of errors, then you have to figure out what kind of errors you're making. The best kind of error sounds kind of crazy, but the best error is, I didn't have time to study that, I didn't know that. That's a very good kind of error to make, but then you have to look at the 12 to 20 hours and step that up. Now, one student came and said, I really thought I was going to get an A on this exam, and I didn't. When you feel like you really should have done better, or your brain says, I should have done better than I did, then you got to find out, what's the disconnect? Am I not understanding things that I think I am understanding? In other words, have I made a beautiful picture in my mind and it's totally wrong? Because I've done that, and it's better to find out before the exam than after the exam that you've got this beautiful picture, but it's totally wrong. So come and come and look at your exam, see what kind of mistakes you're making, and then we can talk over how to maybe improve your study techniques so that you'll get the grades you want. Okay, back to the lecture stuff. Elbow. In the book, you have a medial and a lateral view of the elbow, but this is only showing you the medial view. So anatomical position, ulna is medial, so this is your medial view. When you have something that is collateral, that means there's something on the other side that's just like it. So collateral means on both sides. So the knee, you have a medial and a lateral collateral ligaments. Here you have ulnar, you're going to have radial collateral ligaments. They're coming from the humerus, going to the ulna on this side, going from the humerus to the radius on the other side. Annular means circular. It's not a complete circle, but it is kind of a rainbow shape, half a circle. Annular ligament is connecting the radius to the ulna. And then a little bit of the interosseous membrane is shown there. Bicipital tendon is attached to the radius. And what you don't see here is the brachialis tendon that is attached to the ulna. The wrist ligaments, you don't have to know. You can save those for some other class, maybe down Dr. Prince's course. He'll make you know all of these. But I wanted you to know the bones. Bones are past, so you don't have to focus on the wrist ligaments. Okay, these hands, rheumatoid arthritis. So itis is inflammation. So osteoarthritis is one type of arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is a second type of arthritis. When I left the arthritis center, there were 102 different diseases under the umbrella of arthritis. So osteo and rheumatoid are two, and there are 100 different other ones that have some type of effect on joints. These are the two main ones. Rheumatoid arthritis is a systemic disease. What does that mean? It means it's going to affect organ systems across the body. One of the systems is the joint system. But it also has effects on the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, as other digestive system problems. What you see, what's manifest early, are the joint problems. The joint problems vary from person to person. Some people, unfortunately, have a very aggressive type of rheumatoid arthritis, and their joints are destroyed very quickly. Others have a more slow progressing disease, and they don't seem to be as affected by the disease. What the disease does, the itis part of the disease, is the inflammation is releasing from your white blood cells chemicals that are elastases, so enzymes that break down elastin, collagenases, enzymes that break down collagen, proteases, enzymes that break down proteins. And pretty much you have now just destroyed your entire surface of your joint capsules, inflamed the tissues around the joints, and created a real nasty mess. So all of these really red hot looking joints have been destroyed by proteases, elastases, and collagenases. You can see that the joints are no longer in alignment. The metacarpals are supposed to line up with the phalanges, but they're not. Here you've got the first phalange on the side of the fifth metacarpal. You've got partial dislocation in the thumb, but pretty much full dislocation, maybe a partial dislocation of the ring finger, but full dislocations in the other metacarpal phalangeal joints. Here it's hard to tell, maybe partial, then a full dislocation again, a partial dislocation. So partial dislocation, that is a subluxation. Don't need to do that now. And then this location, that means the bones are not aligned anymore. So if we had more true shape of bone, for a subluxation, you have, make it bigger. You still have it partially aligned, but somewhat disaligned as well. The subluxation is a partial dislocation. Full, not aligned, that's referred to as simply dislocation. You see that the wrists have kind of disappeared. You used to have separate bones that could be identified, separated by the cartilage that was on the surface to interact with the various bones. In the right hand, everything is kind of squished together. The bones look like they've been compressed. Here, they're a little bit more obvious that they're still present, but the joint space is disappearing. So cartilage is wearing down. Here, probably the bones have compressed. Perhaps this person is right-handed. More stresses using the dominant hand for lifting objects, manipulating objects. And so the bones are taking more stress, and they are probably already osteoporotic because of the various medications these people are put on. So they're put on a lot of anti-inflammatories, but they quickly progress to the steroidal type of anti-inflammatory, so cortisols or prednisones. And those will cause suppression of the immune system. They also will suppress the bone mineralization and progress osteoporosis. Okay, there'll be a little bit more about rheumatoid arthritis coming up later, but the reason for the joint destruction is the inflammation sets up an increase in the proliferation of the synovial tissue cells. And they grow outwards, but the joint capsule limits how far out they can expand. Then they start to grow into the joint. And when they come in contact with the articular cartilage, then they break down the cartilage more. You don't want synovial membrane to be in contact with articular cartilage at all. And normally it isn't. But the disease causes this overproliferation of the articular cartilage. So the steroidal anti-inflammatories, being very strong at suppressing the immune system, keeps the cells from releasing as many of the proteases, elastases, and collagenases that are just part of their process of attack. And their attacking is one of the reasons why rheumatoid arthritis is referred to as an autoimmune disease, is because the white blood cells are attacking the body's own tissue, which are normal but somehow abnormal to the immune system. So the prednisones, the cortisols, they're there to try and prevent this attack on the joint tissue. Now they use other things like methotrexate. They've come up with a lot of other medications that will suppress the proliferation of the synovial membrane. So try to prevent it from overgrowing into the articular cartilage. Okay, well, the hip joint is also susceptible to arthritis, but this is a normal looking hip joint. The head of the femur is held in the acetabulum by this ligament of the femoral head, sometimes referred to as the round ligament or ligamentum teres, T-E-R-E-S, because it is round in shape. So teres means round, round means round. This is the femoral head ligament, so there's a lot of different names that are all perfectly acceptable for that ligament. Because the head is held into the acetabulum by that ligament, you have a real hard time dislocating the hip. Easy to dislocate the shoulder because there is no ligament for the shoulder. But the hip, if you've ever worked on chicken and tried to get that thigh away from the pelvis of the chicken, it's really hard to do. You can't break that ligament. You have to get in there and you have to cut that ligament with a knife. A lot of fat in this acetabular fossa. Nice fibrocartilage ring, it's called the lunate cartilage, because it's kind of half moon shaped. There's a fibrocartilage that is going to span, a dense connective tissue ligament that will span the gap in the lunate surface, complete the ring for the hip socket. And then you have 3 more ligaments that will help to hold the hip in the socket. And they're named for the bones that they're coming from, and then the femur. So we've got an iliofemoral. You come back to maybe go forward. Not going to show it to you again. So go back to the bone chapter. Look at the hip. The acetabula is made up, the upper third is from the ilium, the posterior third is from the ischium, the anterior third is from the pubic bone. So the upper third of the joint that's going to be ligament that's going to contribute to joint stability is the iliofemoral ligament. Posterior will be ischiofemoral ligament, and then anterior there will be a pubofemoral ligament. They all kind of wrap from their particular oscoxal bone around to the front. So iliofemoral is coming down to the front, pubofemoral is coming around and down to medial, and then ischiofemoral is coming around posteriorly and to anteriorly and to the front. So they're all angled. Your stance is with your feet mostly straight forward, so the most rotation that's going to occur is lateral rotation at the hip, and they're all designed to help you stabilize during that lateral rotation, and they resist the medial rotation. So you don't have the toes pointing in, can't rotate medially as far as you can go laterally. So here's your teres, your round, your femoral head ligament of the femoral head, holding the head into the acetabular fossa, into that portion of the center that's filled with the articular fat pad. So an accessory fat pad in the joint. And then your synovial membrane, it stops right at the articular cartilage, and it will then line the joint capsule, and then external to the joint capsule will be your ilio, ischio, and pubofemoral ligaments. The knee joint is a very complex joint. It's actually very poorly designed for stability. We've got a tibia that has 2 little just kind of scooped out areas with a little elevation in the center. That elevation is due to the cruciate ligaments that are pulling on the bone and elevating the tibia in the center. The stability for the femur on the tibia is there due to the meniscus, the medial and lateral meniscus. They provide anterior and posterior and medial lateral stability for each of the femoral condyles. Without that meniscus, then there's more chance that the femur will slip off the tibia. So the meniscus is that fibrocartilage disc or ring that will be, one will be medial, one will be lateral. Cruciate ligaments in the center are named for the tibia. The one that starts anterior on the tibia will insert posteriorly on the femur. That will be your anterior cruciate ligament. The one that starts posteriorly on the tibia and crosses the anterior to attach to the femur anteriorly, that will be your posterior cruciate ligament. So they're named for their origin on the tibia, anterior or posterior. The articular cartilage of the femur will articulate with the meniscus, and then a central open area of hyaline cartilage in the center of the meniscus on the tibia. And then the femur will articulate with the posterior surface of the patella. Because it's a hinge joint, but it also non-weight bearing can rotate, you have a lot of little bursa. There will be in front of the patella, behind the patella, above the patella, below the patella, in back of the knee, above and below the knee. They're all over the place, trying to protect the ligaments and the tendons and the bones from coming in contact with each other and causing inflammatory process. The arthritis of the knee is due to either injury to the knee itself or to the muscles that cross the knee. If you damage a muscle, or if you have inadequate development of some of the muscles medial or laterally, and then get malalignment of the knee, that can set up an inflammatory process that then can lead to osteoarthritis. Generally, osteoarthritis occurs after you have overused the joint and that is inadequately stabilized by muscles that haven't been fully either developed or trained to stabilize that knee. Or you've injured the knee and then without strengthening the muscles gone back to routinely normal activities, and then the inadequate stabilization by these weakened muscles then set off an inflammatory process. In the olden days, they used to refer to as osteoarthritis as a degenerative joint disease, and that probably is the best description of osteoarthritis. The joint degenerates because of the instability of the muscles, the lack of proper development of all the muscles. What typically happens, if you extend your knee and you look down at your quadricep muscles, you have your vastus lateralis and your vastus medialis. Your vastus medialis should be hypertrophied and should go down about halfway down your patella. How many of you have a vastus medialis that is hypertrophied halfway down your patella? Huh? That's pretty good, but not quite. Are you a tennis player?
Huh?
Are you a tennis player?
No,
Soccer player? Okay. Anybody have a vastus medialis that's hypertrophied halfway down?
once.
Okay, you got the best, so you stand up on the table and show them.
Serious?
Yeah. I hold your hand.
I did legs today, so. Not that.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's correct.
Oh, get down there.
Yeah.
Okay, but he has actually pretty good vastus medialis development. Somebody overdid his workout today.
Never.
Never?
Never.
Sorry about that. Okay, but he thinks he must need to do some more. Should shouldn't have that kind of reaction.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You want some ice?
No, I'm good. I'm fine.
Okay, so do you do knee extensions with your legs turned out like this? No. That's what you need to do. So with the hips externally rotated, and then do your knee extension. So I'll go into the knee extension machine and do it with our toes up. But do you do it with your toes out? Do you do it with your toes in? If you do it with your toes out and your toes in, you're going to get a better development of the medial and lateral vastus. So one of those is usually weaker than the other. It's usually the medial that is weaker because, well, we just don't spend that much time working on it. And most of the time we're starting and stopping using our, going to the side, and not usually starting and stopping like this. Of course, if you're a dancer and you're doing a lot of lifts to the side, then you get a better development of the medial. But they also spend a lot of time working that medial too. Anyways, so with some instability, then if you injure the knee, and soccer players are very prone to knee injuries, then you don't rehab it, or you don't rehab it back to the right strength, and you go out and play soccer again, then you get some small inflammation, and over a period of years or months or years, the inflammatory process wears away, and then you start to get joint problems, particular problems. Knee is one of those places. Medial vastus is also very important because of this situation. Medial collateral ligament is actually fused to the medial meniscus. The fibers of the tibial collateral ligament, medial collateral ligament, whatever you want to call it, it's fine with me. The fibers actually are part of the medial meniscus. When you blow out the medial collateral ligament, it will rip out your medial meniscus. So you got two injuries with one, due to one ligament being damaged. When the tibia goes out from under the femur, the anterior cruciate ligament is going away from its attachment on the femur, and it snaps. So when you blow out the medial collateral ligament and take the medial meniscus with it, then the anterior cruciate snaps. You got now 3 injuries. So one blow, you have anterior cruciate, medial meniscus, and medial or tibial collateral ligament. So 3 injuries. You probably have heard of it as the terrible, triad, or the unholy triad. There's one other terrible triad, unholy triad. Anyway, so triad, 3 injuries with 1 blow. So this clipping in football, big penalty, it's like 15 yards or something, forget. I don't pay attention to football, but I know clipping is illegal because it potentially, coming from posterior And with the force going medially, you can blow out these three structures with that type of tackle. So with the price of knees on the football field probably being around $50 million per knee, it's an expensive injury. So you don't want to have that occurring in the football players. So posterior view, posterior cruciate, originating posteriorly on the tibia, crossing in the middle of the joint, attaching anteriorly on the femur. Anterior cruciate ligament coming from the front and crossing medially to attach posteriorly. So the posterior cruciate ligament, when the tibia goes out from under the femur, it actually goes closer to its insertion, and that's why you don't blow out the posterior cruciate ligament. But the anterior is going further away from its attachment, and that's why it snaps with that kind of blow. The lateral collateral ligament isn't attached to the lateral meniscus. So if you blow out the lateral collateral ligament or the fibular collateral ligament, the lateral meniscus stays put. It doesn't go anywhere with that kind of injury. And it's unlikely that you're going to have some force coming from between your legs going out or going out anteriorly. It's much more likely that something's going to hit you coming forcefully from the sides. Osgood-Schlatters disease or osteochondrosis is something that will affect young athletes. When kids grow in their teens, especially the guys, sometimes they can over one summer grow 6 inches, sometimes even a whole foot over the summer. They're 5'4", 5'6", when they leave in May, and when they come back in September, they're 6'2" or 6'4". What happened to you? And they just spend the summer sleeping, getting up, eating, going back to sleep. The sleep allows for more growth hormone to come out, and they really pretty much don't have any energy to do anything. The energy is there growing their bodies, so they have to sleep because they don't have energy to do anything else. But with that rapid growth of the femur and of the tibia, these poor little muscles get stretched so much, so fast, they can't keep up with their development. Besides, you're also sleeping 3 months, so there's not much physical activity to hypertrophy those muscles, so they might even be atrophying. They come back in late August, and the coach goes, "Oh wow, you're big, you're first string," and you get out there and you start pounding these muscles. You will probably have joint instability, and you probably start some degenerative joint disease. So the fact that the bones grew fast, the muscles are stretched over these longer joints now, they're going to be tight. They're freaked out. They don't know what to do with this extra tension on them. So they try and stabilize the joint by tightening up. That inflexibility, if you don't work on it, the way that you get rid of the inflexibility is to strengthen the muscle. Spend time in training to get the muscle strong. When the muscles get strong, they will relax. They will not be tense anymore. If you try and stretch passively to get flexibility back, you just further destabilize the joint. So what you have in these two, well, in this condition named for the guys who discovered it, or the actual problem, you have bone and cartilage problems, is that under the physical activity of training and the increased stresses that are then being applied to the joint, the connective tissues get further stretched and unstable, and little micro traumas start to accumulate. And usually they're asymptomatic until they get to about 55% damage, and sometimes 45 to 55, that's when that little straw that broke the camel's back situation occurs. You're totally asymptomatic, and then just a little bit more accumulation of damage, and boom, the whole joint just kind of explodes and is totally traumatized, super painful, and totally unstable. A lot of that happens in rotator cuff injuries too, repetitive use of the arm in overhand serving, in tennis, other kinds of repetitive injuries where you're using the rotator cuff. Usually you get micro damage, just small little muscle and connective tissue damage that accumulate, and then when you get to about 45 to 55% of total aggregate damage, then the shoulder blows out. And backs, in people, you'll probably be working with people in the range of 35 to 55 that will come in with low back pain. And you ask them, well, what did you do? I was brushing my teeth and my back went out. What? I was combing my hair and my back went out. I was reaching into the back seat for my book or my briefcase or a tissue, and my back went out. Said, what? It's just that little extra trauma, and then everything explodes. Okay, so better view, medial or tibial collateral ligament fused with the medial meniscus. The anterior cruciate ligament crossing to go to attach posteriorly on the femur. The posterior cruciate ligament coming from the back of the tibia more anteriorly. The lateral collateral or fibular collateral not attached to the lateral meniscus, so you blow that out, lateral meniscus stays put. You blow out the medial ligament and you are going to pull the medial meniscus off the tibia. Okay, let's go to a little bit of the next chapter 9, which is muscle tissue. Ankles, they're still fair game, but I don't have any PowerPoints for them. So if I don't have PowerPoints for them, they're probably less likely to be on the exam. But not totally missing, but probably no picture on the exam. How's that? Okay, muscle. The Martini first, and then we'll go to the muscle physiology in Sherwood. So 3 types of muscle. Skeletal muscle is what we're going to spend the most time on this semester, and the next semester we'll do cardiac and smooth muscle. But for now, you should be able to recognize the differences. We covered them during the cell. Cardiac and skeletal have cross striations, which means that actin and myosin are highly organized into sarcomere structures. The smooth muscle have actin and myosin, but the organization seems random, but that random organization allows for the muscle to contract from side to side at oblique angles and from end to end, which is very efficient for what smooth muscle has to do, which is close a sphincter or change a diameter of some tube that it's in. Cardiac muscle will have a centrally located nucleus, so will smooth muscle. So they're similar in that fashion. Skeletal muscle will have multiple nuclei. It will be a huge cell because multiple cells have fused to form that one cell. Skeletal muscle will be attached to the skeletal system. That's why it's called skeletal muscle. Cardiac muscle is found only in the heart. That's why it's called cardiac muscle. And smooth muscle everywhere and multiple places, so no special names for it, but they are put together in different fashions. If you want something to close off really fast, you're going to have all the smooth muscle contract as a unit. If you want small little changes like in the diameter of your pupil, then you're going to have individual smooth muscle cells contract independently of their neighbor. So in digestive system, in your vascular system, you're going to have sheets of smooth muscle that will communicate via gap junctions. So in that case, that's going to be similar to the cardiac muscle. The action potentials will be sent from cell to cell via gap junctions. So yes, you will be responsible for knowing what a gap junction is. I'm not going to take a picture from the cell chapter and ask you about it, but you still should know that there are these 6 units of connexons that are going to form these gap junctions. Muscle is excitable. Skeletal muscle is only excitable by you and your decision to contract it. You can artificially contract your skeletal muscle by getting an electrical probe and jabbing it on the muscle or stimulating a nerve, but in physiologic situations, your brain runs your skeletal muscle. The cardiac and smooth, they're under autonomic control, so you don't have to think about those having to have to consciously control those. They're done behind the system. Skeletal muscles respond to acetylcholine. That's the only neurotransmitter that they respond to. Cardiac and smooth muscle will respond to norepinephrine, but also circulating hormones. Contractility means the ability to shorten the muscle. The tension that is developing will be transmitted via the tendon to the bone across a joint, and then the skeletal system will contract. Most of the time, the muscles are crossing joints and then they'll move a bone to have their action. But there are some that are not attached to bones at all. The orbicularis oris is only attached to skin, and the orbicularis oculi only has one tiny little attachment to bone, and the rest is to the skin. But those are the exceptions. The others are crossing joints. Some are one joint muscles. So they start on a bone and only cross one joint. Some are two joint muscles. Some are more than two joint muscles. These guys can have multiple actions. This one joint muscle can only do one thing and will find out why when we get to the definition of an origin and an insertion. Extensibility is defined as the muscle's ability to continue to contract over ranges of resting lengths. So resting length, you could start with your elbow at 180 degrees and then contract it, or you could start it at anything less than 180 degrees until you run into your coronoid fossa with your coronoid process. That stops the ability of you contracting at any decrease in joint angle from like 10 degrees. Or if you really have a massive bicep, some of those guys can't, if their biceps up here, maybe they can't even go much beyond 90 degrees before their forearm runs into their bicep, and that's going to limit the ability to contract at a shorter range, joint range and muscle length. Elasticity is rebound. We've got muscle sarcomeres. If we suddenly close off the ability for myosin to interact with actin, we got little springy proteins in the muscle that will decompress and push our sarcomeres back to resting length. So internally we have an elasticity, but then outside the cell we have connective tissue around individual cells, grouping cells together into fascicles, and then grouping fascicles together into muscle units. When that connective tissue comes together, it forms the tendon that's going to attach the muscle to the bone. Although that is not as stretchable as the internal elastic components, it does have a rebound effect. And so the elasticity of your endomysium, perimysium, and epimysium will contribute to the muscle going back to its resting length. So elasticity, you have internal elastic components, but then external elastic components as well. So skeletal function, move your skeleton, that's obvious. Maintain posture and position. It's a little bit less obvious until there's postural problems, and then it becomes obvious that the muscles need to be strengthened. The posture muscles, they're used all the time. If you don't use them, they're going to be the first to atrophy. So disuse atrophy appears fastest in the muscles you use all the time, and those are your posture muscles. A week in bed due to the flu, your posture muscles have tanked. After 72 hours, you are losing muscle strength. So that's 3 days. You're there for 7 days usually before you feel strong enough to get out of bed and kind of get around reasonably well. So you started to lose at day 3. Actually, you're losing, but it's significant at day 3. You continue to lose strength. By the time you get out of bed, you are significantly weaker, and you need to strengthen yourself before you go back to your daily routine. And so people don't really think about that. As soon as the flu symptoms are gone, the brain is usually flying really high, lack of pain. The brain is having you up there cleaning the ceilings and wiping the floors and just doing everything possible. And you're not really able to do all of that activity, but the brain says, feeling okay? Well, let's go and do it. So that's when you can start to develop the micro injuries that can accumulate and cause the significant damage when they get to 45 to 55% damage. The support of soft tissues for your abdominal region where you don't have bones in the front. Regulating entry and exit. You potty train a baby, you potty train a puppy, and cats can't really train. But you train those sphincter muscles. So babies are very good at training this muscle. Don't want to eat it, close it off. But not so good at the other end to control the bladder and the bowels. But that's one of the things skeletal muscle allows you to do. Maintaining your body temperature. Most of your muscular activity during the day is producing wasted heat. It's not really wasted because it maintains your core body temperature. If you need to generate a fever, your skeletal muscle does that by asynchronously contracting, and you shiver until you generate enough heat. The thermostat in your hypothalamus says, okay, fever point has been achieved, and then the shivering stops. So here's a muscle cell. A muscle cell is a muscle fiber. A muscle fiber is a myofiber. So all of those terms can be used interchangeably. Muscle cell is a muscle fiber because it's long and fibrous in appearance. A myo, meaning muscle, muscle fiber, myofiber. The nuclei are shown peripherally. The nuclei are least important. Most important is the contractile filament, actin and myosin. Those are highly organized and arranged in groups within the muscle cell called myofibrils. Within each myofibril, there are myofilaments. So when I was learning this, it's like, it's too many words that sound alike. So what I figured out for myself, the bigger the structure, the smaller the word. So the muscle cell is a myofiber. The unit of contractile filaments within it is a myofibril, a bit longer. And then the contractile actin and myosin in there, those are myofilaments, longer. So the longer the word, the smaller the structure. The shorter the word, the bigger the structure. That I had to get straight first, and then I could go on learning the rest. Okay, the other thing that's strange about muscle is they've decided that they're going to change the name of the plasma membrane and the endoplasmic reticulum and the cytoplasm. Everything is sarcolemma instead of plasmolemma. Sarcoplasm instead of cytoplasm. And sarcoplasmic reticulum instead of endoplasmic reticulum. So all this sarco stuff. So sarcoplasm, they have it here in yellow. Sarcolemma is the plasma membrane. And then what you can't see yet is endoplasmic reticulum around each of these little bundles. Individual muscle cells will be surrounded by endomysium. So mesium is connective tissue, the furthest in, endo. That will be loose connective tissue that will have nerves and blood vessels and lymphatics in it, keeping them right next to the muscle cell. The muscle cells will be grouped together and surrounded, that group of muscle cells will be surrounded by more connective tissue that is called perimysium. So these cells here will be grouped together The groups of cells will be called a fascicle. So here's muscle cells grouped together, surrounded by perimysium to form a muscle fascicle. The fascicles can contain all kinds of different types of muscle cells. So you could have slow twitch, intermediate, or fast twitch, all within the same fascicle. That means you're going to have different kinds of nerves coming into a fascicle. Each myofiber will be stimulated by one motor neuron, and only one motor neuron, and in a very specific part of that muscle cell. And that will be the neuromuscular junction. A nerve that attaches to a muscle cell outside that specific area of the neuromuscular junction cannot stay attached to the muscle. You can't have more than one nerve attached to a muscle cell. One or none. Because once a nerve has attached to that very specific neuromuscular junction, no other nerve can form an attachment with that muscle cell. Groups of fascicles will be bound together, and then you'll name it for a specific shape or size or function. So a skeletal muscle. So right here we've got a lot of different muscles. We've got different muscles up here. They have different shapes. They have different functions. So some are extensors, some have two heads, so you call them a bicep. Some have three heads, you call them a tricep. There are a lot of different ways to name these skeletal muscles. In the perimysium, larger blood vessels and larger branches of the axon. Out here in the epimysium, surrounding all the fascicles to make a skeletal muscle, you have larger nerves, larger blood vessels, larger lymphatics. So here it's all broken down. You got a muscle, and then you take a bundle of muscle cells surrounded by perimysium, and then you take an individual muscle cell out of the fascicle, and that's what you have here. In skeletal muscles, some muscles have a lot of mitochondria. Those are your posture muscles that are working for you all day long. But others will have very little mitochondria in them. They will only be recruited to function should you have to go and lift your SUV off your baby, or do some horrendously heavy, oh gosh, he's really fatigued and he's gone. Hello. He's storing energy for the next bout that he has to do. Okay, so anyway, so we have muscles that are anaerobic. They will not be contracting unless you absolutely need them for some powerful type of exertion that you have to do. The posture muscles will have a lot of mitochondria because they are contracting all day long. Then there are groups of muscles in between that have more mitochondria than the anaerobic muscle, but less mitochondria than these posture muscles. They are glycolytic, but less glycolytic than the pure power muscles, but more glycolytic than the posture muscles. So we'll be talking about those as we go along. So take a break and we'll come back and talk about sarcomere structure.